Hello and welcome to Herein Lies the Peace of God in the Awakening Together Sanctuary. The Awakening Together Sanctuary is an assembly of equals joined in common purpose, awakening to one true self. Then in an appearance of many faiths, many cultures, and many symbols, we seek to discern one truth and to rest in its embrace. The host of Herein Lies the Peace of God is Reverend Jacquelyn and Eckert, the President and Minister of Awakening Together. Our co-host is your favorite anarchist preacher, Reverend Glen Ganaway, integral scholar. The Course in Miracles says this about discerning one truth. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.
Sing glory, glory, hallelujah. How wonderful thy holy name. Now I can see with God's own vision, and I see peace instead of pain. Yes, I see peace instead of pain. I can see peace instead of pain.
Doggy.
I've still got to get that into the recording.
No, I enjoy saying it every time. Don't put it on the recording.
Well, we do too. It's kind of our signature item.
It is. It's your alls, but I enjoy.
Oh no, we doggies is the thing. I didn't want to impose that on you, but there we have it.
Welcome everybody. It's funny because listening to the opening that Sina does there for us on that recording, and listening to Reverend Yolanda's song, I'm like, okay, what more is there to say? We're done.
Yeah.
Seriously, I mean, as I'm looking back over this material, I'm really amazed how simple it is.
Uh-huh.
And it is about finding peace through finding oneness. I mean, and again, I could sign off with that, I think.
Well, she says, maybe I'll have to look that up, but it's a lovely little trivia fact, but I wonder how many times she says, this course is very simple. She says it probably at least, I think she's going to say, I know she says it at least twice. I think she says it like 5 or 6 times. This course is easy, and we complicate it.
That's true.
Right.
This is true. And so let me just say real quickly what we've been doing here in this program. I have no idea what episode number we're on, but we're well into this thing. 50. Well, how many was that?
15.
15. I thought it was like 25. Wait. 15. But at any rate, what we've been doing, first of all, we looked at the clarification of terms in A Course in Miracles, and then we moved on to the manual for teachers, and we're smack dab in the middle of that right now, and we're looking at the characteristics of God's teachers. And one of the most interesting things about the manual for teachers, who was it I heard? Maybe it was Regina, I heard say that when they got the book, they started with the manual for teachers because they're like, I'm just going to go to the section that has all the answers, right? Like this is a special teachers edition of the
red
course book.
Right.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
not supposed to be able to see that's locked away in our desk under lock and key. You get the manual for the teachers. You can cheat.
That's right. Well, and frankly, I think if we look at this with the eyes of simplicity, we'll see that all the answers are right here in the manual for teachers. The other thing that's interesting about that is Jesus, Helen, makes clear very early on that we're all teachers. Anybody who wants to be a teacher is a teacher. And how do you know you want to be a teacher? It's because you've at some point, somewhere, determined that your interests are aligned with your brothers. So it's just really, really simple. And it's just amazing to see the simplicity and how we're like, nope, I'm going to complicate this thing. So.
I've been addressing my weekly newsletter, my weekly Course in Miracles newsletter, Dear Teachers, for about 15 years now. So that's we're gonna you can tell I've been in sports. That's how you do it across the field or whatever like that. But yeah, and that's the first thing, and I will totally agree with Regina when people ask me, goes, oh, I've heard of Course in Miracles, where should I start? What's the thing, which is you're really into this, how do I pick this up and understand it? I always say start with the manual for teachers, because it's written in a if you don't know anything, she talks directly to the person. I mean, that's the audience. In hermeneutics, they say who's writing, who's it talking to, and what is the time in which they're speaking. So that's why I go directly to. She's talking to the person who does not know, who does not.
It's interesting though, because when I started this all these years ago, I did not think that they were talking to me in the manual for teachers.
Oh, I know. Isn't that the wonderful psychological flip that it does on you? It's one of the main, I think, features of A Course in Miracles is she flips everything you think you know on your head. She doesn't say that you're not. She says, I think in 3/4 of the way through the book, like at page 500 or something, that you're not wholly insane. There's 669 pages, and you have to wait until 500 before she gives you any credit for sanity, any sanity whatsoever. It's not an accident.
That's well deserved. And I know here that Audrey says she also thinks it's a great place to start, and then it's easier to read. And George agrees. So, well, then you all are in the right place.
I know. You think we know what trust? You think we know what trust is, right? Or you think we know what honesty is? That was the one that was. Or last week we talked about tolerance.
Or judgment, depending on who you're talking to.
Judgment, yeah. Depending on who you're talking to. But that was really impactful for me, the variation from the norm. Being tolerance, being, can I stand the human condition in this variation from the norm? But what are we going to talk about tonight?
We are going to start with gentleness tonight. I can read or you can. We're supposed to be switching back and forth, but
I don't remember. I really don't. I didn't go back to the last. I didn't go look.
Let me read the section on gentleness.
Okay.
And then you can tell us about it. And
all right.
Then I'll tell you where you messed up. No, I'm just
Absolutely, and then I'll tell you where you got it wrong, and then we'll do the point counterpoint, and we'll call each other names, and we'll get like 1 million hits.
We'll get it out. Yeah. That's the way the world works.
Right?
Okay, here we go. Gentleness. Harm is impossible for God's teachers. They can neither harm nor be harmed. Harm is the outcome of judgment. It is the dishonest act. Turn the page. One second. It is the dishonest act that follows a dishonest thought. It is a verdict of guilt upon a brother, and therefore on oneself. It is the end of peace and the denial of learning. It demonstrates the absence of God's curriculum and its replacement by insanity. No teacher of God but must learn, and fairly early in his training, that harmfulness completely obliterates his function from his awareness. It will make him confused, fearful, angry, and suspicious. It will make the Holy Spirit's lessons impossible to learn. Nor can God's teacher be heard at all, except by those who realize that harm can actually achieve nothing. No gain can come of it. Therefore, God's teachers are wholly gentle. They need the strength of gentleness, for it is in this that the function of salvation becomes easy. To those who would do harm, it is impossible. To those to whom harm has no meaning, it is merely natural. What choice but this has meaning to the sane? Who chooses hell when he perceives a way to heaven? And who would choose the weakness that must come from harm in the place of the unfailing, all-encompassing, and limitless strength of gentleness? The might of God's teachers lies in their gentleness, for they have understood their evil thoughts came neither from God's Son nor his Creator. Thus did they join their thoughts with him who is their source. And so their will, which always was his own, is free to be itself.
It's like, how bad do you want to be free?
Mm.
And how, if you are you willing to approach your life in a completely different way? Because this idea of gentleness, I mean, coming from a guy who grew up on military bases, you know, and competitive sports, and academia, and you know, it's like, gentleness is right up there, is one of the things that most of us dislike the most about ourselves. And it's reserved only for specific people and specific instances. You know, we as a culture have created really, really codified rules around gentleness in and of itself. So when she says, when she opens this foray into describing what gentleness is, she starts at it from underneath it and inside the hegemony, because she says harm is impossible for God's teachers. And you're thinking, that's got to be impossible. That has got to be impossible. Well, she goes on and tells you why this thinking is important to understand, and why gentleness is such, well, I think it's a real trigger for a lot of people. I remember that I have two younger brothers. One is 18 months younger than me, and one is 4.5 years younger than me. So I was the older brother. I was the older brother a lot. So the thing that I remember most from my childhood, not maybe most is a lot. I remember one of the things my mother said to me a lot was, be gentle, because I had two younger brothers. So it was always, be gentle, be gentle, be gentle. And that, to my mind right now, feels like restraint. This gentleness feels like I'm being held back, you know, from, you know, this ego awareness I have of, you know, myself and the dynamics that's going on for me with this word. And to be completely honest with you, gentleness is something that I've had to grow to appreciate about myself. And it is I've been a target, and for being a soft man, for being a gentle man, you know. And she's flipping, and you just remember culturally that gentle is the polite word we've used through most of Western culture is to mean upper class. So when we talk about a gentle woman, we talk about a gentle man, these qualities are reserved only for, and you're only able to be gentle when you have a lot of power. And that it's given to others. And that somebody earns your gentleness, you know. So so unpacking, when she says gentleness is the quality of God, she's really flipping the class structure, and she's flipping misogynoir culture as well, with anti-feminine and anti-black, because it's the class system is there with that word. Gentleness is a quality of God, and she launches directly into harm for that. So the times and stuff in which she's talking. This course started in 1965. Of course, she heard the voice in 1965. So, and it wasn't published until like 1974. So, what is happening in the world in New York City between 1964 and 1975? The civil rights movement, the gay rights movement, now, National Organization of Women, the ERA, all kinds of things like this. So in that context, she's talking to us about what gentleness is. And she says it's directly linked to judgment. And so we are removed, and she says it's a quality of learning, and it's kind of the foundation or the atmospheric structure that strength and power exist in. And that's really hard for like a Western mind to wrap their head around. Oh, if I'm gentle, I'm going to be exercising and have access to strength and power. Because that's not how we teach people you get strength and power in this world. And it's not even like that kind of thing is like not even desirable. So she's even toying with our ideas of our own sense of place in the world and the exact way in which we walk around in the world. I'm a teacher of God. Gentleness is an important like characteristic for me because I'm always teaching. Because I don't walk around and condemn the world for me not understanding it. And then we don't, contrary to popular belief and contrary to the hegemony, we don't learn by punishment, right? We learn from acceptance and connection and growth and expansion, these kind of things we understand here in the Course of Miracles, but we don't, as people, really, I don't know how to, it's so demonized. Gentleness is so demonized and so like mamby-pamby at its best and demonized at its worst, that to say I want to live as it to be a living example of gentleness in the world where you aren't condemning others and this judgment leads to harm. That's what she says. She goes, we need to be about gentleness because our judgmental thoughts are leading to the harm of other people and ourselves. So harm actually achieves nothing. Again, it's this idea of means and ends. Be about acting in the world the way that you want the world to act. The way participate with the world the way the world is, instead of trying to wrestle it to the ground and put it into a box that's acceptable to me, or like that works for me. That's not gentle. And a lot of the new education systems, the unschooling and the rewilding and the way and all of one of the central tenets to this new wave of uneducation and re-education, and is to end the punishment and end the carrot and stick dynamic in education. Like stop the testing and like stop the rewards, to be gentle, created the gentle, vulnerable learning space in which kids are able to actively choose. That mindset is how the Holy Spirit, I think, one of the really clear ways your mind is clear and you're not trying to manage the input from other people and you're able to absorb and understand. That's a gentle world. I think the world really, really is very, very gentle. I think it's naturally gentle. It's why we go into the woods, and like lean against a tree or like ride a horse or be with animals or something, because it's just so gentle. And what does a cat do if you will not stop petting it? Because I have a cat who likes pet me, stop. She gets her claws out. She goes, you'll be gentle with me, or I'm gonna make it difficult for you to to do that, but then you stop and then she lets you keep petting her again, but don't pet her the way she doesn't. You don't touch her belly, by the way. I've got the most odd cat. You can't touch her tummy. So I don't know what that's about, but so this being gentle means that I'm listening and I'm caring and I'm paying attention. And she does a lot of this, and so it allows us to learn. She calls this the judgment is the end of peace, which we all really understand. But the part that really got me, the part that I really, really sort of loved, was to choose the strength of gentleness, because it gives us the power to do what we want to do in the world. It gives us the strength and the power to do our function. And we have the access to the might of God, gentleness and might. That's not something we associate together, is it? Gentleness and might. It's like, we kind of understand it, right? We have movies like The Green Mile. We have the books like Of Mice and Men. We have The Gentle Jump. We have Gentle Jump. We have the I Rope. We do in this culture understand that the more that gentleness can be a quality that's really appreciated in somebody with a lot of power or a lot of emphasis or strength.
Yeah, but you know what, Glenn, and I love that your literature, your references to literature. But anytime that's represented that way in literature, it's a paradox. It's like, wow, how could that possibly be true?
Yeah, it's a lofty, wild, unusual occurrence, right?
Yeah.
So unusual that they made a movie about it. And often these things are magical, right? The green, all these things, they're magical. Oh, I cannot believe! Isn't it supernatural that this really strong guy is kind?
I know.
Or like we're supposed to, and we're praised for. I was praised for being gentle, as a kid. But as soon as I got into elementary school or kindergarten or things like that, there was no reward for being. There was absolutely no reward for being gentle. Not the schools that I grew up in. So it was a complete. It's pretty wild. So, but won't dwell on my tragic childhood.
We all have one.
I know, my tragic childhood where I was abused because I was such a sensitive little child. Depending on the day, I was probably quite a little as well.
Yeah.
But I like gentleness. She says we don't get hurt because we're living in a world that's already gentle. So even when somebody is being mean and aggressive and everything like that, it's not harming us. It's like the person who loses their mind in grief or something, and then somebody has to come and hold them because they're losing their mind and they're flailing their arms all around. He goes, no, you come, it's gonna be okay. You can't chase after the.
Yeah, I've seen that scene.
Yeah, 100 times, right? That kind of that I like. I get that. It's it leads to insanity. This idea to judgment and harm, the guilt and all. It leads to insanity, to where gentleness looks like a detriment. It looks like the last tool that you're going to pull from the thing, or the last thing somebody wants to call you. It's like, what if you were telling your, I don't know, is this a good quality? What if you tell your girlfriend, goes, oh, you should go out with this guy. He's so gentle.
Actually, it is, but
I know, but I know. I think it is too. But that's not, that's not the meme. That's not the, what is in the thing. But I liked this, and gentleness this week has been a little bit. From my understanding, this week has been a little bit more about self-care. I've been working with gentleness as more of a self-care. Stop the judgment and the guilt about doing, being kind to myself or being gentle to myself, or gentle to my needs. I am hungry, I need to leave, or I am frustrated, or being, for me, it comes often to ask for help. Like when I don't know something, because I don't, I'm pretty good at Excel, but I'm not great at Excel. My superior, the guy I work with is just absolutely master. It's like watching him on Excel. It's like playing the piano, because he's just using the keyboard and things are popping up and moving in and out. It's absolutely glorious to watch. And the gentleness comes from me. It goes, okay, I need to go ask for help to do this, to finish this spreadsheet and everything like that. So I'm like, okay, it's going to be okay. You're going to ask him to come over here and fix all this for you because you messed it up. And just that kind of, oh, yeah, I don't want to add her injury. I don't want to add more to the problem. So I'm going to be gentle. And it always works out, but I have to allow the gentleness to come through, allow it to be okay the way it is. And it's, it's just like approach it, with forcing it. I'm a guy, and I want things. I want to. I've told you this before. I used to, for a long time. My spiritual practice was about wrestling my ego to the ground and dragging it to the River Jordan.
Yeah, I love that.
So that's not gentle. That's just not gentle. But had this come across for you, Jacquelyn?
First of all, thank you. That was lovely. Really, really sweet. Thank you. It feels, just talking about it feels very gentle. And I was always one who went kicking and screaming and and forced the square peg into the round hole and all that good stuff. So it occurs to me that like we started today, we talked about the fact that God's teachers, simply defined, are somebody who's seen their self-interest in alignment with someone else's. But it's like God's teachers are defined after the fact, which is interesting because, I know a big portion of A Course in Miracles talks about cause and effect. I was, and I'll pull this together hopefully here, but I was also, I had just written down something about means and ends here on my paper as you were speaking, and then you said means and ends, and I'm like, oh my goodness. But I think that's what we're witnessing here in the Manual for Teacher is the fact that means and ends are always the same, and that's why it seems like these terms are being defined a bit oddly. Thomas is asking some technical questions, by the way. Thank you, Thomas, for your questions. And he's asking what's the format, and can anyone talk anytime, and does the reading continue when no one else is talking, and what's the length of the meeting? So let me just address those real quick. This is an hour-long meeting. And yes, anyone can talk, but Glenn and I are both so verbose that I'm not sure that you'll be able to get a word in edgewise. But we'll try and leave time for that.
Questions are good.
And we welcome your contributions.
Questions and clarifications are welcome. Yeah, yes, certainly.
Absolutely. So let me just look at this idea between, and I have been amazed. The first time I heard means and ends are always the same was when Inner Wisdom told me that a few years back. But that's, I think, what we really see. Well, first of all, I really see in my personal experience that the longer I do this, the more gentle I become, because I'm came from, come on, let me, I'm gonna do this thing.
Me too.
That's been my history. That's exactly what I've done. It felt like it was helpful to be a scrapper, to get in there and fight for what I wanted. And it seemed to work well until it didn't, as every other thing in this crazy place. Let me just see if I can get back to the means and end are always the same. Okay, so the point here is that she explains gentleness by looking at why it's safe to be gentle. and why it makes sense to be gentle, and how could we be any other way? What stood out for me was she talked about God's curriculum. Let's see where she does that. Here it is.
Paragraph 2.
Yep. She says, harm, as you said, she starts out talking about the opposite. Harm is the outcome of judgment. It's a dishonest act that follows a dishonest thought. It is a verdict of guilt upon a brother and therefore on oneself. It is the end of peace and the denial of learning, the opposite of trust. It demonstrates the absence of God's curriculum and its replacement by insanity. So let me back up, and I know this is circuitous, and I apologize, but one of the things that got me, and maybe when I wrote down means and ends are always the same, as when I read the definition that Shauna had typed on the chat board here of gentleness. She typed, gentleness is the quality of being kind, tender, or mild-mannered, softness of action or effect. So it's not like we go in and we go, okay, how do I be gentle? How do I do this thing? It's not that at all. It's the fact that God's curriculum and your pursuit thereof is what informs your way of being. So what is God's curriculum was the question that I had to ask myself upon reading this. And the answer is, it's simply the remembrance of oneness, period. What else could God's curriculum be? And in the realization of oneness is the realization that there could not be any opposition to the will of the one, period. There's only one thing going on here. What is there to be opposed, right? How can you be opposed to all there is, or what? Who would be opposed to all there is, or what? It just makes no sense. And to think that you could be opposed to anything is insanity, is the belief in something other than the all that is. So you can see how it's a direct opposite of God's curriculum, which is the remembrance that there's only one thing going on here, the remembrance of the all that is. So it's diametrically opposed to that. So if God's teachers were to teach anything but this universal curriculum, they wouldn't be God's teachers, would they?
Hard.
So it completely defeats that purpose. So then I asked, so what does it mean to be wholly gentle? And again, it may be contained in this reading. It's certainly contained in lesson 186. But basically, it means to come to oneness with wholly empty hands.
Empty hands.
Yeah. And of course, what that represents is total acceptance and total allowance.
And empty hands are also without a weapon.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Just it's the whole reason of shaking hands and all that. No. It's an excellent point. It's an excellent point. And this Jesus or Helen or Inner Wisdom or whoever wrote this this thing, it's amazing because it's written on so many levels. There's so many cultural references in here, and it works on you without you even knowing it. So it's just really beautiful to see that. But again, to be wholly gentle is to come to truth, come to God, come to oneness with wholly empty hands. And that represents total allowance, total acceptance. We talk about it here a lot as loving all, right? Because to want something that isn't, or to argue with what is complete insanity, is the root of all suffering.
Looks interesting though.
Say?
It's just very tempting. Just like.
Just to it's so funny because it's and the other thing I wrote down here somewhere when you were talking was this. She says somewhere here in the text that the ego always gets it 180 degrees wrong, totally opposite of what it is, and that's what we've gotten. And when you were talking about what is this gentleness is strength? Who equates those things? Well, certainly not the ego, but that's only because ego has 180 degrees wrong, completely opposite of what it truly is. But again, and you go, loving what is, you're going to love everything. You're going to love child abuse. You're going to, and I know I talked about this last time, and I tend to be an extremist, so I go to the worst case example. But we might try with something easier. I might love that my drive home today took 20 minutes instead of 10. It's by practicing the gentleness that we're reminded of God's curriculum, right? We're reminded of who we are. I don't need to oppose what is. I don't need to oppose a you that seems to be over there. That reinforces the insanity, and not just the insanity of how we are, the whole premise of what we think we are. Mm-hmm. So to argue with reality is a direct attack on the truth, right? It's a direct subscription to the belief in separation, and that way does lie insanity. That whole belief system is insanity, and that way does lie suffering. And we talked last week in Something Genuine about the fact that self-will is the source of all suffering.
Yes.
Excuse me, let me close my door. It's so funny.
No.
I was listening to Regina earlier, and for some reason she turned on in there on my tablet. She just in my living room talking. So that's so funny. So if you want to end your suffering, what do? You go out and do for others. You serve, right? You perform the service for supposing others, right? Which is service to the one true self. Of course, that's a perfect antidote to suffering. Where does suffering come from? It comes from believing that I have a self-will. Only if I have a self-will do I need that to be different, and do I need you to be like this, and do I need the drive to be short? Only with self-will. Complete surrender goes, wow, look at this. It's amazing to be alive. This liveness, this process was a process that was meant for joy. Mm-hmm. So if you want to appreciate that process, if you want to eat the joy, I get this, juice running down. If you want that, right, then you need to love what it is. And that is so counterintuitive. That is so counter to what the ego thinks. What do you mean? No, I got to make it happen. But no, that's not what it's about at all. And again, like all the other characteristics of God's teachers, they build on each other. Yes. But they're all they're all built on a foundation of trust. And as we spoke about early on, what is trust but the recognition of one's own invulnerability? Again, self-will, suffering. Only self-will could want things other than they are. Loving all is total surrender. And by the way, guess what you get? Joy. I mean, that's a natural occurrence, right? When all self-will is let go, because this whole living being thing is a process meant for joy, that's what you get in the end. And she can tell us that in the next So
guess preview, ladies and gentlemen, guess what the next characteristic is.
Yeah. So I think, particularly since Tom has asked, I think what we ought to do, Glenn, is open this up and see what other people have to say on the subject. I am going to mute myself for a moment while I step out of the room and turn Regina off.
Okay. And I want to, while you do that, I want to say that when you were talking, there's an idea of trying too hard. That like a lot of effort is, I can't be gentle. I'm working hard here, so that's really, it's like saying, oh, I'm trying too hard. The world is a gentle place. The lessons could come to me easily. The learning could come to me easily. Forgiveness could be a way of being. My gentle nature could be an aspect that I appreciate. The gentle world just looking at the way animals care for each other is just absolutely I mean, I love all those unusual animal friendship videos. There was just I populate my Twitter feed with that because of the other stuff I have in there. But so that's this. I just really like. It's like, oh, when I'm not being gentle, there's an aspect of trying to force it. There's an aspect of trying too hard. There's an aspect of lack of trust that everything's the way it can be or should be for my own awakening. It's like, oh, I need to start shaving and whittling around the edges in order to get this, and that is violence. When you say you aren't allowed to be how you're being, you aren't allowed to exist or present in you cannot make the decision about how you exist or how you present, because that's my decision based on how I'm encountering you. And so you only get gentleness from me is if you toe the line.
Yeah, gentleness, right.
I know.
Let me ask Thomas. Thomas, did you want to share anything? Welcome, by the way.
Oh, sure. Yes. I think there are several levels here. When I was listening to you talk about gentleness, I was thinking, well, what is the opposite of gentleness? It's when you're agitated, like, hey, you cut me off, you asshole, or, or hey, it says $2 and you're charging me $3, or what are you looking at me like that? And so it's emotion, that comes up in us that makes my blood boil. And then it's the expression of the emotion, which can lead to road rage or, interpersonal conflict, et cetera, But the reason I said it's many layered is that, I think it's important to recognize the emotion when it comes up. If you're with your partner and, hey, I wanted to do that, and you just walked right up, there are levels. There's also the level of, well, I'm gonna do what you want to do because I love you, and I'm gonna bite my tongue and sit on my emotion. And so I think,
well, listen, I don't think those are necessarily the same thing. Yeah. I really hate to, but they're not. Those are not the same thing, because it is possible to not get what you think you want, and not be and to feel the emotion and to do what your partner wants, and not be inauthentic
or lose.
Yeah.
Well, you mean what you're talking about is sort of feeling the emotion, but deciding I'm going to love rather than be agitated.
Exactly, because and that's always the question: what do I really want?
Yeah.
So if you're, so you get agitated and you go, wait, what do I really want? And so we're not denying that emotion. We're not denying the agitation. But what do I really want? I want the peace of God. To hell with it.
However, it's really important, say, with your partner, to communicate, not to just roll over, I think. In other words, to communicate, hey, I really wanted to see this movie, but because I love you, I'm going to go along with you, but it makes me feel like a namby-pamby or whatever. I mean, I'm distinguishing between sort of a saccharine thing of, oh, yes, I'm gentle, I'm loving, I'm the divine, I'm going to do everything. I mean, that's a total wimp. And the essence of communication is saying, hey, I love you. And I remember last weekend we went to see the movie I wanted to see. So I'll go along with you, but I'm just feeling agitated, and I'm feeling like you're wearing the pants or whatever,
Well, yeah, a couple of things come to mind. There's a really good thing that I've been working with lately is a couple of weeks ago in the course, as I teach 12.8 pages a week, is she says, communication is healing. And like boundaries are a way you tell people that you love them, or boundaries are really, really healthy things. Um, so, I think boundaries can be, should I are gentle. Um, and you spoke directly, Thomas, to the way I opened my thing with, it's difficult to really have a discussion about gentleness when how gentleness is used in the Course of Miracles as a superpower, a superpower of learning, a superpower of being able to take action, a superpower of being able to connect with others. So this gentleness, the world says you can't be gentle. Now, because I remember I was reading the Course of Miracles, when I found the Course of Miracles, I read it 3 times, like just right incredible. The third time through, very, very clearly, it was the very first time I ever kind of really understood that the ego was not me, because
Exactly.
a voice that was not mine says, you can't live this way. They will rip you to shreds. I'll never, ever, ever forget it, because that is where my ego lives. You cannot be this kind. You cannot be this forgiving. You cannot be this gentle. You can't just overlook and forgive and not go after the consequences for these people who are awful. You just can't, and you can't let people treat you that way or think these things about you.
Go ahead.
So no, like that was such a beautiful. That's why I call the Course of Miracles the manual for liberation, because it is so threatening to the way that the world says it exists. These, the laws of God are called the laws of God because everybody has to obey them. And the law is gentleness gets you way farther toward happiness and the peace of God and the experience of heaven on earth than does judgment, guilt, or violence in any way.
Let me address again, and this was my word. It's not one that Thomas used, but he did talk about being. He didn't say pretending either, but pretending and being saccharine sweet, and again, the word that came through for me was the concern about being inauthentic. I should, if I'm authentic, I tell my partner that you just irritated the whatever out of me. But the reason it feels inauthentic when we do that is because you're not gonna like this, because we're mistaken about who we are. We're identified with the ego. We're identified with the one that says it don't work that way.
Uh-huh.
You work that way, you're going to be a doormat. You're going to be mistreated. But that whole thought system is what you're not. And as we sit here right now, it may feel inauthentic as we begin to go, okay, whatever you want, because we are identified with the false self rather than the true self. Of course, Miracles calls it ego and Holy Spirit, but Holy Spirit is your own Holy Spirit. It's your own true self, and your own true self doesn't give a damn whether you see this movie or that movie. Your own true self just wants to just like hang out in the, isness, hang out in the peacefulness of just hanging out. Yeah. So so again, when it feels like you're just like shoving your emotions and not dealing with them, they don't belong to you anyway. Those aren't your real emotions. Those are ego BS.
She calls them evil thoughts in this thing.
Yes.
She has she doesn't use the word evil this is the first time she uses the word evil, in the section on gentleness. So it's like, that's what we because of evil we can't have gentleness. I mean, there's evil. There's no way that gentleness is going to overcome evil.
It's funny. It's funny too, because again, like Thomas said, or Tomas, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, said a moment ago, I got lost in that. What I wanted to say about evil was that really she's just referring to life lived backwards, right? I know that's goofy, but it's true. It's this backward stance of ego or the false self. It got it 180 degrees wrong. No matter what you're talking about, if ego tells you, well, you need to, you better. There was a Seinfeld episode where George Costanza did everything the opposite of what he thought he ought to do. And of course, he flourished. But yeah, I mean, that's really what we ought to do. The opposite of everything that's being said here by the one who lives in our mind and the one who doesn't like us. Tomas, how you feeling about all this?
I think I'm having some mixed feelings. I think different people are different, and so there are some people who say are very mellow and just go with the flow of everything, and then there are other people who are, like say activists. Someone who's an activist is fighting for justice or whatever, and they are not going to go with the flow. And so, I when we talk about, God and the divine, we sort of get up into this Holy Spirit that's like you're smoking pot and like totally stoned out on it. So I hear you. I hear what you're saying, but I've always been, my nature is very much on the ground and trying to keep myself from, I don't smoke anymore because of that. You end up, believing and going places that are totally unreal. Anyway.
Yeah. And when you talked about activists, I recalled I wrote this down a while ago. I too thought of the peace marches, right? Yeah. They're called that for a reason, right? So you can be an activist without, knocking heads together.
And just a reminder that Cornel West this past year did a whole speech thanking Antifa for saving his life on several occasions because of their, and he says because of their gentle nature and standing, because of their gentleness, they stood between the blows that were coming. That the way they could be gentle was to take the blow for me.
Mm.
Well, I hear what you're saying about, the peace marches and Antifa and so on, but I know, I'm involved with some homeless groups around where I live outside of the Bay Area, and
thank you.
People in this homeless group that I'm part of are not just sort of riding down the river, because the reason they ended up homeless is they just sort of rode down the river, and now they're basically in a swamp. And so, anyway,
I hear you.
They're outraged that they're in their 60s and they're broke and they're living in a tent, in a park, and they're eating donated food, and like they've been working their whole life, and how did this end up to them? And they should be outraged because of our economy is screwed up.
Yeah, it's not very gentle, is it, Thomas? So if we wanted to live in a peaceful or a gentle world, I think you would probably agree with me that there would be less starving and abused people in the world.
Sure.
Right? Because to actively to look at somebody and say, no, you haven't earned the food that too much free stuff for you, dude. There's just you have to earn. See, this gentleness, two things. Gentleness first implies a material existence. There's an element of that is inside of a material existence, because gentle is the force. The force of pressure on something. You can be gentle or hard. There's a material quality to the aspect of gentleness, and it's a violation to be a less than that. The gentleness is allowing things to be as they are and approaching people where they are. The other part of gentleness is that it creates an atmosphere of trust and understanding. It creates an atmosphere of belonging. So if you can get the gentleness in group cohesion is really important. We understand this in family dynamics, because don't hit your sister. But we all are going to go hit the enemy, the neighbor, or whatever. But you can't hit your sister. So we understand inside the paradigm of gentleness and boundaries and all of this that it's only for certain people. That's why I opened this thing with. Please understand that when we're talking about gentleness in this paradigm in which the Course in Miracles is attempting to flip for us with continual difficulty, to say that value gentleness, because gentleness is the way that the world works. If you want to move forward your function in the world, it must be through a way of gentleness, because the world doesn't have to be forced. The world is operating as God's will. The world is moving in the direction of God's will, whether we can understand that whole plan or not. I'm not in charge of the plan. I'm in charge of what mine is to do. And that gentleness that I start from here is what I share with others. I share with you my gentleness, not some concept of gentleness. I share with you my gentleness. It isn't an airy-fairy notion, because just park in a crosswalk and see how gentle I am. I'll probably pound on your hood and tell you to get out of the crosswalk. And I think that's being gentle, because I would really like to take a baseball bat to your front windshield, because you're so uncaring and you're making all of us walk out into traffic to go around your car because you're so inconsiderate and clueless. But that's the gentleness I need to work on.
Yeah, and I'm getting a couple of pictures here, and one is of Peace Pilgrim, and I know Laura's a big Peace Pilgrim fan, and so she's probably not going to appreciate my telling of the story, or my half telling of half the story. My understanding of the story is that a man was attacking a little girl, and Peace Pilgrim with a knife or something, and Peace Pilgrim saw that, and instead of going out there with a broomstick or a baseball bat or whatever and attacking the man, she went out there and with love and in gentleness and diffused the situation. And so as A Course in Miracles tells us, gentleness is a very powerful force. The other image that comes to me is Jesus. Jesus on the cross, right? He wasn't walking towards wherever that is, Golgotha or whatever it is, going, "You sons of bitches, get over here so I can kick your ass." What is it?
He could have, though. He could have.
But his point was, what I am is invulnerable. What you are is invulnerable, and that's what he was teaching. And within invulnerability is the epitome of gentleness, right? I mean, that's what we just talked about. That's God's curriculum. God's curriculum is to show you that there's only one thing that's going on here. We're all one. How could you be vulnerable in a world where there's only one thing going on? You can't. We're all invulnerable. That's what Jesus taught. That's what gentleness teaches. So the question has to become, what do I want to learn? Do I want to learn that this crazy cockeyed 180-degree world is true? Or do I want to learn the truth of my being, which is invulnerability and gentleness?
I know. Do I want to live in a world where I got to have sharpened knives and elbows and everything and live on my edge in some kind of Walking Dead dystopia, or something else, in which it's over and over and over again. It's like you just don't be not. You're too. I was told growing up, you're too nice. Have you ever been told you're too nice?
No, rarely.
I've been told I'm too nice my whole entire life. And it's not a compliment. It means exactly what Thomas says. You're wishy-washy. you're namby-pamby, you can't make up your mind, you're weak mind. That's why I started this conversation with please don't make the mistake that the world has made and with misogynoir with the idea of gentleness, pushing against gentleness because it's in the feminine way. It's in a feminine way of being. You want your women to be, you want your boys to be tough, and you want your women to be gentle. You got 2 minutes. So it's like I really, really like this idea of speaking about gentleness because it is so demonized in our culture. You don't want. No one ever says, "Let's select him to public office. He's so gentle."
Right? Hey, I hate to break up this fun, but if you want to play our outro, you best do it now. I love you all. Thank you for letting us be here and just chatter.
All right, here we go.
Thank you for being here with us.
Is this always the Course in Miracles work teacher's book?
Well, until we finish it, yes, sir. On Sunday nights at the same time. Sunday. It's not Sunday. This is Friday. On Friday nights at the same time.
Sundays at 5 is when you can see Yolanda and I.
But yeah, this is always a Course in Miracles.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Herein Lies the Peace of God with Reverend Jacquelyn Eckert and Reverend Glen Ganaway. To find out more about Jacquelyn and to donate to Awakening Together Sanctuary, go to www.awakening-together.org. To find out more about Glen and to donate to the Mighty Companions Ministries, go to www.glenganaway.com. That's GLENGANAWAY.com.